So I said to disabled people I knew, why aren't you applying to the employers that do want your talent? And they said, because we don't know which is which. Every employer, says we are an equal opportunities employer, we are an inclusive employer. But actually their lived experience was that, no, you aren't when it comes to disability. Now we say it's not a luxury, it's a business imperative.
Yeah.
If you don't have neurodivergent people within your organisation, what are you doing? Because you'll be missing out on all of that different way of thinking, different way of solving problems, different ways of seeing opportunities. So I think we've gone about things in the wrong way. What we should be doing is asking the question, what are the barriers that prevent disabled people from entering and then progressing within the workplace? I think where we've gone wrong broadly as a society is that the workplace was created for humans that don't exist and have never existed. We have known forever the business case of employing a diverse group of people, and yet nothing is changing. The problem isn't humans, the problem is that businesses, companies aren't geared up to employ humans. And so the solution to that is
every leader has a story to tell, and the Safe Leader podcast uncovers the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. Join me, your host, Mark McBride-Wright, as we hear from business leaders, academics, entrepreneurs, and agents of change as they share their journeys of innovation, resilience, and transformation. Together, we explore how they embrace the principles of safe leadership, sharing, acting, feeling, and empowering to create safer, more inclusive environments for everyone. Hello, welcome to the next episode of the Safe Leader podcast. I'm your host, Mark McBride-Wright, and today I'm joined on this episode by Jane Hatton, who is a disabled social entrepreneur, keynote speaker, author, and one of the UK's leading advocates for disability inclusion in the workplace. In 2011, she founded Evenbreak, an award-winning social enterprise run by and for disabled people, with a mission to reduce the global disability employment gap through inclusive recruitment, training, consultancy, and career support. Before launching Evenbreak, Jane spent more than 2 decades delivering equality, diversity, leadership, and management development programs across the public sector. Her career began in residential social work, supporting young people and supervising social work students, experiences that shaped her deep belief in dignity, equity, and removing barriers that prevent people from thriving. Jane is the author of A Dozen Brilliant Reasons to Employ Disabled People and A Dozen Great Ways to Recruit Disabled People, a TEDx speaker and 3-time Shaw Trust Power 100 honoree. She has advised organisations including Amazon, Apple, Coca-Cola and GSK, helping leaders create workplaces where accessibility and inclusion are embedded rather than added as an afterthought. Jane, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm delighted to have you on. You and I have had a email relationship, I guess, ongoing for, well, ever since I set up Equal Engineers, I think.
Yeah, and before that, I think, when you were at National Grid.
Yes. Yeah, is that where we met? Did we meet?
Yeah, with the supported internships.
Yes. Oh gosh, wow.
It's going back a bit, isn't it?
Well, I remember doing. It's all a bit of a blur, to be honest. We did stuff with Pride, with National Grid when Melanie was there, and then I spoke on some panels. And I really had a concentrated network build phase in that sort of 2014 to 2017 years, and it's hard to sustain when you're a founder. I almost find with entrepreneurship that when you first launch, they're your rich years of building. And actually, even some of the people today who I would be my first go-to, and you're in that circle, when I think it's because of relationships that I built way back then, even though we've never worked on anything or collaborated on a project or done anything. It's just, it's
We're
like
just there in the background.
Yeah, it's like championing from the sidelines when we see each other at events or Actually, we'll talk about the inclusive supply chain event later on that we never
Okay.
managed to
Yeah.
triangulate on last year. But yes, so for the audience, tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us about who you are, what you do, why you do what you do. Maybe we even can go back to the start, the younger Jane, and what did you want to be when you were older?
Yeah, I wanted to be a musician. Well, when I was
Okay,
very little, I wanted to be a ballerina and a tightrope walker and a vet and all those things that, people go through the phases of wanting to be. But then I decided on music. Music was going to be my life. I played the violin very badly, but with a lot of enthusiasm,
okay,
and played in amateur orchestras and things. And so my plan was I was going to do my A levels, go to university, do music, perhaps join a regional professional orchestra at the back of the second violin section. But my father, bless him, and I don't mean that literally, told me that I didn't have enough talent and that I should get a proper job, just as I was in the middle of A levels, and I didn't have a plan B. So I had a kind of unusual, random career to start off with, which makes sense looking backwards, but didn't make much sense at the time.
okay,
So I left school halfway through my A levels, went to do business studies, ironically at college, with no intention of ever running a business or getting involved in a business. And then I worked in civil engineering for a while,
Oh,
this
okay.
was in the late 70s. Women
Right.
just didn't do civil engineering, it just
No.
wasn't a thing. There were women in the building, and the terminology of the days is that they were secretaries and telephonists and
Right.
typists and caterers and cleaners, but definitely not engineers or
Okay.
anybody who made any decisions. So that was an interesting experience at the age of 17, 18.
Yeah.
But then I did conform to stereotypes and go and look after children in social services, which was very much a woman's, not in the management strata, but in the delivery strata was definitely female predominant.
Gender inequality in the other direction. Yeah. Lacking on all those
Yeah,
levels.
exactly. But I think throughout all of that, and even as a child, one of the things that I became, I think, a little bit obsessed about was fairness. And I
Okay.
know that every child goes through that phase of it's not fair, but I think I kind of got stuck there. And apparently, when I was 8, I don't remember this, but my mother tells me that I used to love going to primary school, but I suddenly didn't want to go anymore, and I would feel sick in the mornings, and do I have to go to school? And it took them a while to work out what the problem was, but apparently the problem was that the children who had free school meals had to line up separately from those
Oh.
of us who didn't have free school meals. And although I wasn't in that line, it seemed outrageous to me. Why should we be in separate? Why should we all know who has free school meals and who
Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't?
Yeah. Wow. God, that's
And so
really early
my
on then, isn't it? Yeah. That
yeah, and my mother went to the head teacher and said, the reason Jane isn't coming to school or is suddenly taking a dislike to school is because she's outraged by this unfairness, and
Yeah.
they changed the system. So they changed the
Wow.
system so that the children who had free school meals were given tokens,
Right.
and we all lined up the same, and we either paid our money or our tokens, and nobody was any the wiser. So
Yeah.
I don't actually remember much about that, but I'm going to take her word for it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it sort of went on from there. So although when I look back, engineering, social work, EDI, it seems very random, but there was a thread around how people fit in or don't fit into organisations, and that's kind of stayed with me and probably led to Evenbreak.
Um, I think you would benefit from getting a copy of Erin Weed's new book called Just One Word.
Ah,
I did a session with her. Her whole thing is about this process called the dig. And essentially, you spend time with her and she asks story after story after story. It was actually really useful mining content for if you want to write a
yeah,
book or do a keynote speech. But anyway, the idea is that she tries and distills everything down to like one word. And it's your
yeah,
word that is the golden thread through your life.
yeah,
And when I did it, my word was justice, and it sounds
I
like
was just about to say social justice is
there you
kind of,
go. I
that's two
think that
words, I know, but
we're
yeah,
probably very similar. I think it sounds to me like that is exactly the sort of,
yeah,
but more than it just being your word, it's actually the operating system that you build around yourself. Like
yeah,
you
for
can't
sure.
stand for the injustice, and so it manifested itself in your behavior. Like you never went to school, you know, it affected you.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that so how is that fire then, and that drive, that kind of, you know, that feeling where you see an injustice and you just sort of grit your teeth and you're like, I'm going to
Yeah.
fix that. That fire that you've channeled through Evenbreak.
Yeah.
Where did that juncture come in your career
Well,
trajectory?
yeah, I think that's an interest. Well, I think it's an interesting story. Other people might not agree. I was in the field of, not surprisingly, diversity and inclusion
Uh-huh.
because of this obsession with fairness. From sort of the 80s, it was around the Macpherson report and Stephen
Mhm.
Lawrence murder.
Yeah.
So race was very big then, and that was an injustice that I think anger probably comes through as well.
Okay.
Angry about why are people treated differently because of something as irrelevant as the colour of their skin.
Yeah.
And, you know, the whole looking at the institutional racism within the police force and recognising that actually that institutional racism is everywhere. It's
Yeah.
endemic. It's part of our society. Really fired me up. I was less fired up about gender equality for some reason, maybe
Okay.
because I felt it was a bit too close, maybe, I
Hmm.
don't know.
Hmm.
But I was doing a lot of work around race, gender, disability, and in the sort of late 80s, there was a growing recognition of age discrimination and
Okay.
LGBTQIA+, although it wasn't called that then. And so those things as well. And I did a lot of co-work with people with lived experience from whatever group it was we were talking about. So we did a lot of work on race equality in local authorities and the services that they delivered. But the training I delivered was always co-produced and co-run with a black co-trainer so that it
Yeah.
was authentic.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I was really interested in at that time was disability because it seemed to be almost forgotten. It seemed to be right at the bottom of
Yeah.
the priorities when we talked about diversity, if indeed it was in the list at all. And I can
Yeah.
remember being quite angry about that because the repercussions for disabled people are, you know, huge because they're not just around prejudice and discrimination, they're structural barriers.
Yeah.
But I felt a bit, you know, I didn't have lived experience. My mother was severely disabled, but I didn't have personal lived experience. So it was one of those things that I was angry about, but felt a bit toothless about
Bit
doing anything.
rudderless. Yeah.
Yeah,
Didn't have a grounding. Okay.
that's right. And then when I talked to employers, they would say things like, "Why would we want to employ a disabled person?" Or even, you know, more positively than that, they would say, "You know, we recognise that this is a group of people that we should be targeting and employing, but we have no idea how, and disabled people don't apply."
Right.
So I
Right.
said to disabled people I knew, "Why aren't you applying to the employers that do want your talent?" And they said, "Because we don't know which is which. Every employer,
Right. Right. Right.
you know, says we are an equal opportunities employer, we are an inclusive employer." But actually their lived experience was that, no, you aren't when it comes to disability. And I
Yeah.
remember feeling really angry about that and thinking, you know, someone should do something about this. It's just wrong.
Yeah.
And then, ironic twist of fate, I became disabled. So in my early mid-40s, I developed a spinal condition, which I think had been occurring for about 20
Right.
years since I had a riding accident in my 20s, you know, accelerating damage in my spine. And so I had, I won't bore you with the details, but I had spinal surgery, which actually left me barely able to walk or stand or even sit.
Yeah.
So I ended up lying in bed with a laptop sort of
Yeah.
suspended above me, thinking, oh, now what? And in between feeling very sorry for myself and grieving the life that I'd lost,
Yeah.
I revisited this whole thing about disability and where it sat on the priority list of diversity and equity, and thought, actually, nobody has done anything about this. And this
Here's your
now,
chance.
actually,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't take the credit for all of the idea. It was a colleague as well who came up with the idea of having a job board that was just for disabled people and just for those employers who were enlightened enough to see us as a source of talent rather than
Yeah.
a source of problems. And actually, I incorporated Evenbreak 15 years ago tomorrow, so it's our 15th birthday, which is very,
Ah,
very exciting.
congratulations.
Thank you. And but of course, it was very slow to start because in those days, this is 2011, there weren't niche job boards. It wasn't a thing.
No.
And it wasn't like I was saying to employers, oh, I've invented a better photocopier than one you've got, use mine instead. It was something that they needed to do as well as what they were already doing.
Yeah.
And that was quite a big sell. So it was a difficult conversation because employers would say, well, if disabled people want to work here, they'd just apply, wouldn't they? And having to have that conversation around, well, when you've gone for so many jobs that you know you could do standing on your head with your eyes closed, but you don't get the job, you start to stop knocking your head against that brick wall and you start realising it's not that I'm not good enough, it's that they don't think I'm good enough. So there's not much point in me applying to organisations that don't very explicitly say that they are interested in disabled talent. So it's a long conversation. But eventually, I'm pleased to say, it did, well, you know, it's flown since it started originally. And so originally it was just a job board in the UK for disabled people. Now we are the only and first, but still only, global job board for disabled people that's run by disabled people for disabled people. There are other global disability job boards, but they're not run by disabled people. So that's something we're very proud of. But also we started recognising that employers were coming to us and saying, this is great, we're getting disabled talent that we never got before, but we're not sure our recruitment process is quite as barrier-free as it should be. We're not sure our hiring managers are really confident around disability, you know, they're a bit frightened of getting things wrong. Could you help us? Yeah. So we then started to offer training and consultancy to organisations to help them become more accessible and inclusive. And then we were getting candidates saying, oh, can you help me with my CV? Can you help me with... And we weren't really sort of geared up for that. So we'd signpost them to other organisations and they come back and say, yeah, but the mainstream career support doesn't take into account the additional barriers that disabled people face when they're looking for work. Right. So we were lucky enough to get some grant funding during the pandemic and we set up a career hive which was specifically around offering support to disabled candidates.
Okay.
And so we've grown a lot in that 15 years. We support candidates, we support employers, we have a global job board.
You're being that bridge, aren't you? You really are being a metaphorical civil engineer. You're building a literal bridge for talent pool and talent source and talent sink and talent.
And what gives that bridge really good foundations to carry on the civil engineering metaphor is that everybody at Evenbreak has lived experience of disability. So everything that we do has inclusion and accessibility built in right at the start. It's kind of universal design. It's not something that we put on at the end and kind of try and retrofit it. And I love working with the Evenbreak team because I have obviously personal knowledge of my disability, which now, thankfully, I'm a lot more mobile than I was. I spent about 7 years pretty much in bed, but over the years, slowly, I got more and more mobile. Good. So I understand chronic pain, I understand mobility, but I don't have lived experience of sight loss or hearing loss or schizophrenia or learning disability or, you know, all of the other challenges that people face. And so it's great having a team of people who will say, hang on, Jane, that might work for you, but it wouldn't work for me because I'm autistic or that wouldn't work for me because I use a screen reader and that is absolute gold dust. So it means that we take into account all of the barriers that our candidates face because of our own lived experience, and that's a thread that has run throughout and will continue as long as Evenbreak, you know, is needed. It will be absolutely run. Everything will be designed and delivered by people with lived experience of disability, which I'm very proud of.
It's a truth, isn't it? It's an authenticity that you can ground in your company's foundations. How have you found the developing conversation, like a station on that journey, neurodiversity. So
Yeah,
how have you felt? I mean, even in the I don't know, Eco Engineers is 9 years old next month,
yeah,
and neurodiversity wasn't in the vernacular to my
yeah,
knowledge, or if it was, we weren't covering it, like 9 years ago. But about 5 years ago, emerging term, neurodifference, neurodiversity, neurodivergent, becoming mainstream. So how has that challenged, served as an opportunity, like a sort of broader talent pool for Evenbreak services to be aligned with?
yeah. It's made a massive difference, and I'm so glad that it's now come to the fore and people are recognising neurodiversity for the opportunity,
Yep.
that it is. But also, it highlights how much we were doing wrong previously. And a bit like I was saying before, we have neurodivergent people within the Evenbreak team, and the innovation and the challenge and the why do we do things this way is just absolutely amazing. And we used to say to organisations, you really need to employ neurodivergent people because they will keep you at leading edge and innovation and leading the thinking and all of that kind of stuff. But now we say it's not a luxury, it's a business imperative.
Yeah.
If you don't have neurodivergent people within your organisation, what are you doing? Because you'll be missing out on all of that different way of thinking, different way of solving problems, different ways of seeing opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think because it's become almost like a sexy conversation, and there aren't many sexy conversations around disability, but it's become quite popular, it's sometimes a good gateway to get in. So we find that engineering companies, particularly tech companies,
Yeah.
are very keen, for all the right reasons, on attracting neurodivergent candidates. So that's a great way for us to start that conversation, and then we can broaden it out to how about people who face different challenges because they bring additional value to your teams as well. So I'm really pleased it's now talked about as much as it is. As you say, I mean, when I was at school, nobody was diagnosed with autism or ADHD. They were just naughty kids or aloof kids. And looking back, you think, yeah,
Well, that was going to be my next question. There's a pattern now whereby people recognize, if their kid goes for a diagnosis and
yeah,
then they then come back and think, oh, that describes me, and therefore I go for a diagnosis and then I've got this as well, or there's traits of this
yeah.
in my family. So how are you finding when you do the consultancy side of Evenbreak's work? Um, ma- are you finding more like a peppering of aha moments almost being created through the education of the workforce, which is then driving more people looking for answers, I guess? Or
Yeah, I
I know
think
you
so.
don't need to have a label attached to who you are, and I always
Yeah,
feel like I'm
exactly.
walking on eggshells as a non-disabled person myself when I have this discussion. So
Yeah.
me and my
It's
discomfort is
really
both.
interesting. I think what the discussion around neurodiversity has done has really thrown a lens on how badly organisations were working previously,
Yes.
because it is so much more common than we recognise,
Hmm.
and it's not around has someone had a formal diagnosis or not. What we say to organisations is if you have an employee who is facing barriers, then what you need to do is remove those barriers.
Yeah.
Whether they have a diagnosis, what that diagnosis is completely irrelevant. If an employee says, I work better with this type of monitor, or I work better if you give me information in this format, or
Yeah.
I work better if I'm given agendas before meetings, then why would you not do that? And actually, why would you not do that anyway? So now we always send agendas before meetings, not just because there might be neurodivergent people attending, but because it's good practice.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
think
Keeps you
what
focused.
neurodivergence has done is just made us think about how we operate as businesses and how we can make that better. And that's better for neurodivergent people because it means their access needs are being met. But actually, it's better for the organisation as a whole because we're just doing things in a much better, more organised, holistic, inclusive way.
Where where are you where are you seeing the movement now with with EDI, with disability, with how like the UK government are supporting or enabling. I'll admittedly not really kept up to date with, the government's two-tick scheme, which was
Yeah.
brought over from the London Olympic Games, I think. This kind of golden thread that's supposed to have evolved across the last, 15 years, actually.
Yeah,
So
it clearly
yeah, how
hasn't.
it hasn't
Because things,
exactly.
no, because things haven't changed. We still have the same disability employment gap we had before.
Right.
We've only had a change of government fairly recently. I think it was quite clear that the previous government had no interest in supporting disabled people,
Okay.
just getting them off benefits somehow to save the welfare bill. And unfortunately, the current government seem to have continued in that vein. So when
Right.
they talk about disabled people, getting disabled people into work, it's very much around we need to get the welfare bill down, not actually how do we support, not actually looking at the reasons why there are so many disabled people who don't work. And I think what happens is that if we don't look at the origins of a problem, we're solving the wrong problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened. And I think the perception, which is absolutely not the case, is that disabled people aren't working because they don't want to, because they have a better life on benefits, because they're lazy. I'm not saying those people don't exist. I haven't met any. They may exist. But we work with thousands upon thousands of disabled people who are desperate to work, who are highly skilled, highly talented, highly motivated, go for jobs, multiple times a day, every day, and still get rejected. So the problem isn't the motivation of disabled people. The problem is the barriers that stop them. And that might be inaccessible transport. It might be inappropriate housing. It might be I can't afford the bus to get to the interview because I'm on benefits and I can't meet my family's needs. But often it's the recruitment process doesn't work for me, or the employer has already decided they don't want me as soon as they find out I'm disabled.
Yeah.
That isn't something that disabled people can influence.
No.
All they can do is go for jobs and challenge the barriers, but they can't bring them down themselves. So I think we've gone about things in the wrong way. What we should be doing is asking the question, what are the barriers that prevent disabled people from entering and then progressing within the workplace? And that's a whole raft of things, but those are the things we need to be putting our attention towards. And that's why we do so much work with employers, because it may be that they're not attracting disabled candidates because the disabled candidates don't know they're wanted in that company.
So it's maybe it's a comms piece, or maybe there's some negative comms that's tarnishing the reputation of the employer that they're unaware of because it was a case from yesteryear, and actually they've done a ton of stuff to try and improve it, but it's still out there.
Absolutely. Maybe. Or even if there hasn't been a case against them, the assumption will be, unless you prove otherwise, I'm going to assume you don't want me, because that's been my experience with every job I've gone for. So I think it's about making it explicit. I mean, sometimes I talk to employers about using Evenbreak and they'll say, oh, we're not ready yet to advertise to disabled candidates. And you have to say, what do you mean you're not ready? Well, we need to look at all of our processes and practices and are we as inclusive as we should be? And that's great that that's what they're thinking around. But the assumption is we're not already employing disabled people, which they will be. It's just that disabled people won't have told them.
Or they aren't asking. Their data structures aren't set up for them to share. Yeah,
or people don't feel safe to share, maybe. Yeah. That's, another huge one. And it may be that they, maybe it's their recruitment process. But unless they have disabled people within the organisation saying, actually, this doesn't work for me, it's never going to change. It's not going to be that one day they wake up and spontaneously, oh, now we're ready to start advertising for disabled people. We need to do like a two-pronged thing, get more disabled people in the organisation who can influence practice, but also bring in people with lived experience from external so that they can say, well, let's have a look at your recruitment process. Did you realise that this might be a problem? Did you realise that your application form doesn't work on a screen reader? Anybody who uses a screen reader is unable to apply for your jobs. Yeah. Or did you realise that asking this question can be quite threatening for, so whatever it might be. And usually it's not done deliberately. You know,
Yes,
it's done.
just miss
It worked for most people, so why? And then, I didn't understand. But the organisations that we talk to are doing a lot of really good stuff. It's just the candidates don't know that they're doing that really good stuff. So a lot of it is, as you say, very much about letting them know that this organisation isn't perfect, but they want to be, and they're
Yeah.
trying to get better in terms of accessibility inclusion, and they want you to come on that journey with them so that they can support what you're doing and inform what you're doing. And that's a much more honest way of attracting disabled candidates than either saying we're not going to advertise for them because we're not ready, or we're perfect, we've got everything in place. Because nobody, you know, we only employ disabled people, we're still learning every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's the former what you described there is just being the ostrich, isn't it? Head in the
Yeah.
sand and not willing to engage. What role do you see adjustment passports or whatever their term is these days? You know, where you have a so you don't have to keep having the question and answer and coming
Yeah.
out every time we are, but just something that sits with you in your HR record and can move around with you
Yeah.
internally, and managers can become privy to it, and it then just sort of ideally slots into place and happens.
I think it's a really good idea, because otherwise every time you change manager, whether you've moved to a different team or your manager's left and someone else, you have to go through the whole rigmarole
Yeah,
again. And sometimes it feels to disabled people like you're having to justify the
yeah,
adjustments that you need.
yeah,
And nobody should feel that they have to justify
of course.
asking for what enables them to do their job better. So I think adjustment passports can be great, but actually the better ones that I've seen aren't just around disability.
Uh-huh.
It's like everybody has things that they have preferences at work, different management styles, different communication styles, times when they're, you know, I'm not particularly a morning person, so if
Uh-huh.
you want me to be creative, don't come to me at 8:30 in the morning. That's nothing to do with my disability, that's to do with just who I am. So, you know, I think it's really helpful for organisations to have that kind of how does this person work, what
Mm,
works best for them, information that goes around with them. And it has to be revisited because people's roles change or their
yeah.
condition changes or their lives change. So it has to be revisited by managers. Is this still the case? Is there anything else that we can be doing that would support you? So it's updated. But I think it's good to have that it's just established as this is how this person works, this is what we need to do.
And you need it as well, sort of independent of when you're in one bubble. You know, I know there's a big drop off when students or pupils go from school to university or apprenticeship,
Yeah,
whatever it is they may pursue, and then similarly from FE or HE then into employment. These kind of interface changes are points in time when there's a higher likelihood of a
yeah.
unsuccessful transition to a new employed state.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
we find that a lot. I think there are a lot of our candidates who have received, thankfully, I mean, it wouldn't have happened years ago, but now are receiving the support they need in
okay.
school. Not everybody, sadly, but, you know, it's getting better. And university. And then it's a hell of a shock when you then join the workplace and those things have to be fought for often.
Right.
And they're not just given to you by, you know, as a right, which they should be. It's kind of, well, why do you need that? Well, what condition have you got? Can I see a doctor's letter? Yeah, what? I'm just
Yeah.
telling you how I can work better for you. It's not about needing to justify or needing proof. This is in your interest because I'm going to be a better employee
Yeah.
if I'm able to do the job that you're paying me to do.
How, if we were to redesign things then from scratch, or, I mean, that's a bit of a utopia. So if maybe if the question's couched in the way things currently are, what's, uh, how can we work together better? And I say we as in like businesses, society, or local councils, or education providers, or what can happen to what would a really good, well-oiled engine of this working well look like?
Well, I like to think that we model best practice at Evenbreak because we started out with what's best practice, and that's what
Okay.
we're going to do. So we are incredibly flexible, not just in terms of you can start any time between 8 and 9 and finish any time between 4 and 5, but how many hours do you want to work? When do you want to work them? Where do you want to work them?
Right.
And looking at job carving and where people's skills and aspirations lie and all of those things. So it absolutely can be done because we're doing it. We're far from perfect. We're still learning. But, you know, if the will is there, then things get better. I think where we've gone wrong broadly as a society is that the workplace was created for humans that don't exist and have never existed.
Yeah.
There was a kind of the owners, the leaders of the organisation, often factory, are the people who have all the power and who know everything. And the people who are employed to work there are expected to have no life outside of work, never be off sick, be predictable, be in the same mood all the time, have the same levels of productivity every day, not have opinions, not contribute to the running of the organisation in terms of making suggestions. And so there was a kind of command and control parent-child relationship between the leaders and the doers.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can see there may be some very historical organisations where that might have had some merit, but it has no merit in today's workplace.
No, not at all today. It eludes, it's exactly I've gotten really into sort of financial education recently, more for my own benefit because I need to get better at planning my future. But it was talking about the rise of the entrepreneur and entrepreneurship and portfolio careers and how the British education system was imported, essentially modelled in Germany, I think. I might be getting this wrong. But the idea of having standardisation, trying to create conformity, lack of pushback, with a view that these workers, these people would then go and work in factories and be cogs in the machine. So it worked for the Industrial Revolution, but we're not in that phase anymore. And yet we still teach and educate and assess in that way.
And run our companies.
And run our companies, yeah.
Yeah.
That,
and I think, you know, we miss out on so much because no human is like the one I just described. You know, we all have lives outside of work. We all have good days and bad days. We all have opinions. And organisations that are set up to celebrate that difference. I mean, this is, you know, disability is part of that, but we're talking about humans, really, aren't we?
Yeah.
And an organisation that is set up to work with individuals who are unpredictable, messy, sometimes have lives that interfere with their work. Those are the organisations that are going to get the absolute best from their people and the most productivity and the best ideas. And I think it's to do with trust. And I think we saw this a lot in the pandemic, that there was initially, but if people work from home, we can't see what they're doing. How can we trust that they're not just sitting there watching daytime TV? Well, Evenbreak was, you know, people were working from home since 2011, long before the pandemic.
Well before then, yeah.
And it was never a case of, I need to see what you're doing, because I trust people to be adults. And anyway, you're going to see, aren't you? If you're employing someone to, I don't know, write social media posts, and no social media posts are going out, then that's a performance issue, and you need to say, is there something we can do? What support do you need? But you don't need to say, tell me what you do at 9 o'clock, tell me when you start to work, because it doesn't matter. So long as the job gets done to the standard it needs to get done, it doesn't matter how it's done or where it's done or even when it's done, so long as it meets the deadlines. Yeah. And so for me, if you treat, I suppose I'm talking for myself here, but if you treat me like a slightly naughty, rebellious child, I am going to behave like a slightly naughty, rebellious child. So, for example, you know, I worked in local authorities years ago, long before automation, where you had to literally sign in with a pen, the hour and the minute that you signed in, and then you would sign out at lunchtime, the hour and the minute. You'd sign back in, and then you'd sign out at the end of the day. And Friday afternoon was taken up by everybody adding up how many hours and minutes they had worked compared to what they were being paid for. And if it was more, then you could claim that back as flexi time, and if it was less, then you owed them in time. And the amount of time it took us all to work out 7 hours, 24 minutes times 5, you could have been doing, but being so much more productive. And it got to the point where people were trying to find ways of cheating the system, not because they were bad people, but because if somebody is watching every second that you work, rather than actually saying, what value are you adding within that 7 hours, 24 minutes? I could have been sitting at my desk for 19 hours a day and
Yeah.
producing nothing of any value, or I could have been working for 6 hours a day and creating
Big
immense amount of
impact.
value.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not about presenteeism, is it? And I think we're still, as organisations, very much, is their jacket over the back of the chair? Oh yeah, they're still in the building then. So
I've
what?
not worked in an office for a long time, so yeah. Well, that's a lie. We did take out an office space, but we were out on client sites, we were visiting,
Yeah.
and it then became a overhead that the business just didn't need. So,
Yeah, exactly.
we went back to um being remote. We're always remote.
And I
Um,
wonder why organisations haven't learnt that, because during the pandemic, we proved that people worked well from home.
it'll be
And then,
realistic. It'll be realistic.
yeah,
Like they're paying all these expensive rents, therefore people need to be at desks. Otherwise, we're
yeah.
we're paying for all these empty offices.
And I get that some people prefer to work in offices. I absolutely understand that some people working from home is a nightmare. It might be their home circumstances. It might be just that they love the social aspect of being in work. Some people feed off the energy of people. That's absolutely fine, but it should be a choice.
Yeah,
So, and
it's the
not just a choice for
hybrid
disabled
flexible
people, a
work.
choice for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, commuting is inefficient.
Yeah,
Commuting is inefficient and uncomfortable, especially in the heat that we've got right now in this heat wave.
and not
So,
great for the environment.
and not great for the environment. So, if you can just let people align what they need, then that's the best, isn't it? Because you then build the trust and commitment
Yeah.
from the individuals, because you're allowing them to have the autonomy that they need to make the decisions that they need that work for their personal life. I mean, I think unless you've become, well, I'm not saying you have to become a parent to know what that means. Um, Certainly, the way I've appreciated knowing what that means is when I became a father, and when juggling school pickup and school drop
Yeah.
off and dual income household, and one of you working and the other one not, and it's very complicated. It's like a mile and a half, but then you get into a rhythm that works. To have I can't imagine being in an environment where I'd be clock watching and being
Yeah.
like, oh, I need to wait until 5 o'clock before I can leave, or I can't go. I mean, it's a whole other thing, isn't it? How we need to
Yeah. I mean,
restructure
that's
school
bad for
hours.
everybody, isn't it? But I think that there are certain groups within the workforce it's even worse for. So, for example,
Yeah.
parenting still tends to largely fall to the woman. So it might be the woman who's working part-time or who has flexi time so she can pick the kids up or whatever it might be. And so they're disadvantaged because they're not seen to be committed to the workplace. Or if you're disabled and you have hospital appointments, or you have, I don't know, therapy or whatever it might be, or you can't work solid 8 hour days, you need breaks, then you're seen as less efficient or less committed. But actually, if we were to recognise that all humans have things that are happening in their lives and in their bodies outside of work, that's the way it is. We need to build that into the way, rather than being frustrated because not every employee conforms to this ideal robot that doesn't
Yeah.
exist. We need to accept we are all different. We are all, and we can be much, much more productive and creative and loyal and motivated if our workplace takes all of that into account and doesn't pretend it's not there. Just accepts that. Okay, so you work different hours to somebody else. It doesn't mean you're less productive or less valuable or less committed. It's just a different way of doing things.
I think I said you're right. A sort of sense of purpose that work can bring um, really helps people's spirits, doesn't it? Yeah. I think my mum was on dialysis eventually. Her kidneys gave up and she needed dialysis, and she was in a wheelchair as well. So when that happened to her, that was sort of 4 years worth of time. And that really, in my chapter of EDI evolution, that was my first experience of lived experience by proxy, so
Yes, yeah.
I still feel it's lived experience because I lived it, but it wasn't indirectly I lived it. It wasn't
Yeah.
directly me. But it was certainly more real than me hearing secondarily from stories
Yeah.
of people, and just yeah, I mean, the number of appointments that she had to go to, and the disconnected care system, and the social care that was needed towards the end of her life, and the, there's just, it would have been. I think even if she had been, I think it would maybe would have helped her spirits had she been able to continue to do something or just be
Yes.
connected. But I think
Otherwise, you're
her,
just a patient, aren't you? You don't want to be a
yeah, I
patient. You
think
want to
that's
be
it. And
human.
she just sort of, and she just sort of gave up. You know, you could
Yeah.
see the wind in her sails. Just kind of, I'm now a liability, an obligation, a sort of. I mean, in her particular situation, I do think it would have been difficult for her to work, and also she was used to working in a healthcare setting, being a nurse, being in work, being with
Yeah.
patients, doing. So her version of work was different. She could hardly use an iPad or anything technology either. So she's like, there's no point, Mark, in me learning all this. But anyway, it was like a window for me into um like, yeah, people who are disabled with a physical disability, who want to work, just how difficult it can be, how inaccessible the city is, how much
Yeah.
longer you have to plan for to journey across London because it takes you an hour and a half rather than half an hour because
Yeah.
the direct tube that you want to get hasn't got step free access or
Yeah.
lifts. And
And it may be you've had care support in the morning, so you've had to get up really early to get, to get ready for work. Then you've got to
yeah,
get to work. You're exhausted before you open your first email. And
yeah,
it's
exactly.
sort of just it's acknowledging that and finding ways that will support that. So if that person works from home, they're not going to be exhausted before they start. They're going to be much more energetic and productive. So it's
Absolutely.
just about what works. And I think the thing is, lived experience is really important, but no leader is going to have lived experience of everything.
Of course.
There might not have been a carer, there might not be gay, there might not be from a different background or whatever. It's about listening to the people that work with them and accepting. Somebody says, this is my life, these are the barriers I'm facing. That's all you need to know. You don't
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
feel it yourself. You need to accept.
So
Okay,
true.
thank you for sharing that with me. How do we make sure that the business still gets what it needs from you, but that you get to work in a way that works for you as well? And you have a conversation about how that might work. And you can be
Mhm.
innovative and you can think of different solutions. And if every employee knows that that conversation is available, then the
Mm.
loyalty goes up, the motivation goes up, the retention goes up.
So would your
Just
suggestion be that is a sort of, there's a way to standardize, well, standardize, there's a way to proceduralize having that conversation and almost like roll it out as some training to line managers and departments and then providing
yeah,
a
yeah.
script and a way to capture that data. I mean, I feel
It's
part, I
really
mean,
not difficult to do. I mean, we do it for disability. So, for example, one of the things we recommend in job adverts, rather than saying, are you disabled? Yes, no. Do you need support? Yes, no. That can be a bit, ooh, why are you asking that question? Is it so
yeah,
you
yeah,
can discriminate
jarring.
against me?
Yeah.
If instead of putting something quite as harsh as that, you put something like, we want all of our candidates to shine in our recruitment process. Please tell us
Yeah.
what you need us to do for you to show us your best self. Doesn't mention disability.
Mm.
It's saying it to everybody. So it might be a parent saying, please don't interview me at 3 o'clock, I've got to pick the kids up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah,
it
yeah,
might be someone saying, my care support doesn't leave till 10, please can I have the interview after, or whatever it might be.
yeah.
So we ask everyone that question. What do we need to do to make this work for you? And similarly, on appointment to a new recruit, to every new recruit, regardless of who they are or whether we think they're disabled or not, what do we need to do to make sure you thrive here?
Mm.
It might be
And
nothing, thanks, I'm good, or it might be flexible. And it's
yeah.
about that conversation, isn't it? It's about you can have everything you want. Because, I mean, I would like to say, can you pay me this salary but I don't have to come to work or do anything? That's not going to work for the organisation. So you have to have a conversation around this is what the organisation needs in terms of value from you, and how can we make that work so that it works for you. It's an adult to adult conversation that people will engage with and appreciate.
I think your third book needs to be A Dozen Great Ways to Retain Disabled People
Oh,
because
funny you should say that. My third book
no.
is in the process of being written.
Is it? Oh, right, cool.
It's a completely separate one from the first two, so we'll have a different kind of title. But what I learnt through promoting the business case for employing disabled people was not just there's nothing wrong with disabled people, it's the barriers they face, which is something we've known for a long time. It's that we have known forever the business case of employing a diverse group of people, whether that's disability, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whatever it might be. And yet nothing is changing. The problem isn't humans. The problem is that businesses, companies aren't geared up to employ humans. And so the solution to that is, yes, it's accessibility and inclusion, but it's about that in a much broader sense in how do we have workplaces that produce what the workplace needs to have produced and treats its people like humans and harnesses all of that extra value that humans bring with them that usually they leave at the door because nobody's interested in anything other than what they do, what they bring to the job. So yeah, I haven't got a title yet, but it's very much it is, but it's around workplaces and how looking through an inclusion lens has shown us that workplaces really aren't geared up for human beings, and that's something we need to change. Fantastic. And that's why we haven't changed. So we've been having initiatives on disability, initiatives on race, initiatives on gender, initiatives on all of which are vital and need to continue. But we've forgotten the basic thing, which is about all of those groups and everybody outside of those groups shares the fact that we are humans, we lead messy lives, things change, our priorities change. We need to accept that and build it into our workplaces.
Do you know one? I want to come on the quick fire questions in a moment, but one final point of conversation that I wanted to mention actually, because I referred to it at the beginning. The one thing that I noticed is missing, so maybe this is another gap for your next business, is getting certified as a disabled-owned business. There is the certification.
Don't get me going on that.
So why at that inclusive sourcing summit that we went to? You know, I'm a proud LGBT certified business without Britain. There's MSD that does ethnicity, and We Connect
for
gender for women, and Veteran owned UK, and an emerging business that for former veterans that have gone down the entrepreneur route, become founders. Nothing on disability.
No, and the annoying thing is that there's diversity which is in America, but it's global,
right? Becoming
global, and we said, "Oh, great, we'll join." Oh no, you're a not-for-profit.
So it's a
Connect. I said, "We're a women-owned business. Can we join?" Oh no, you're a not-for-profit. So there's a problem there because a lot of social enterprises, by definition, not-for-profit. Are owned and run by people with lived experience.
Yes.
We are barred from, we are excluded from those accreditation things. So yes, there is absolutely a gap in terms of having certification for disabled. There's so many of us out there.
I know, and it, you know, talk about tapping into the purple pound, and once you do it right, there's like billions and billions of pounds of market value there, and loyalty, and
the whole Social Value Act, so that, you know, public sector bodies particularly need to know how much money they're spending with social organisations, but how do they know? Because we're not certified, and there is a big gap there. Yeah, maybe in my next 15 years.
Brilliant. Right, okay, I could talk for hours. Okay, quick fire questions. What's one myth about disability you'd love to bust?
That we're object of pity. That we are functioning human beings who do things differently.
What's one phrase leaders should stop using?
Variations of "I know best, do as I say."
What's the most underrated aspect of accessibility?
That it helps everybody. I think we tend to think about accessibility as something we put in place for disabled people, but accessibility helps everybody. So if you have a door that automatically opens, that's not just great for wheelchair users, it's great for people with a buggy or carrying heavy stuff. You know, Siri, or the other, you know, the electric toothbrush, you know, they were all originally accessible aids for disabled people, but actually everybody benefits from them.
Didn't know that about the electric toothbrush, but makes sense now that you say it. What's a book that changed your perspective on leadership and inclusion?
Oh my goodness, I should have looked at these questions in advance, shouldn't I? There is a really good book, I think it's called Inclusive Leadership, and it's by, I've got it on my shelf. It's called Inclusive Leadership, you'll find it. And it's brilliant.
What's one thing employers often overcomplicate?
I think they tend to think that workplace adjustments are going to be very complex, very expensive, and usually it's can I keep the walkways clear because I might trip over something because of my sight, or can I have a bowl of water for my guide dog, or you know, whatever it is. So, and also I think, if I can have two answers, they think they need to be the experts in everything, and they don't. They just need to ask the question, what do you need? You don't need to be an expert in neurodiversity or mental health, or you just need to say to everybody, what do you need me to do? Because it's the barriers, not the diagnosis.
What's the most memorable lesson you've learned from building Evenbreak?
I kind of knew this before, but that the value of lived experience has been transformative in how much I've learnt as a person, but in terms of how Evenbreak has evolved, and hearing voices that rarely get heard, and making sure that, you know, everything we do now, when we started the Career Hive, we're all disabled, so we could have been the focus group, but we were all disabled people who were working. So we got another focus group of 50 disabled people who were currently looking for work. Okay. And they came up with the barriers that they were facing that we hadn't thought of. Amazing. So it really is about the value of not assuming you know what somebody else is going through. Ask that question, and the value of lived experience cannot be overestimated. It's just, you know, phenomenal.
What's a challenge that turned out to be a gift?
I think becoming disabled. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but Evenbreak wouldn't exist if I hadn't become disabled. It turned into, you know, what was horrible for my children, for me, turned into a bit of a blessing, really.
And finally, what's one word that sums up what inclusion means to you?
Fairness.
Fairness. Justice. Fairness. There you go. Beautiful circle back to where we started. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you, Jane. Really enjoyed that conversation. If people want to get in touch with you or find out more about Evenbreak, how can they do that?
Well, Evenbreak is evenbreak.com. So you can find our website. I'm on LinkedIn, so if you search for Jane Hatton, my email address is jane.hatton@evenbreak.com. I'm very happy to have conversations with, this is my favourite subject, as you can tell, so I'm very happy to have conversations with anybody who would like to.
Fantastic. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Jane. Speak to you soon.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it too.
You have been listening to the Safe Leader podcast, uncovering the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. If you have enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the Safe Leader podcast on your podcast platform of choice and get notified when a new episode goes live. Did you know that we also offer a full transcript on each of our podcast episodes? Check out my website, markmcbride.com. Here, you can also explore the training, coaching, and keynote speaking services I offer. And whilst you're there, why not join the Safe Leader community by subscribing to the Safe Leader Insights mailing list? Thank you for listening, and please come back and join us on a future episode.